So from Thomas again, can you explain what part planning plays in your business specifically and your process?
So I think planning and planning gain, I know that Paul doesn't like that word, which is why I used it deliberately, play a big part in our development strategy. I think one of my first multi-house developments was in 2003, 2004, and during the course of that project, I realised that actually I'd started work on site, but the site actually had a lot more capacity for development than I'd realised, and so what became clear to me when I saw that was that actually what I should have done is, rather than just jumping in and developing the site out, I should have waited, optimised the value of the site, and then started developing. And by having started too early, I'd left a lot of money on the table. And so I think that's one of the things that's driven into our strategy, the enhancement of the value of projects before we even start work on site. And if you find the right site, you can make more profit out of the enhancement of value and de-risk the project than you can out of actually developing it. So I think it's something that's very important.
Evan, so pretty key. When Darryl was up here, he was talking about IRR, and if anyone does their IRR on a development and compares it to what that planning flip that Thomas did in 12 months, I'm pretty sure it would be a stonking percentage on their money. Just showing the value. Sorry.
Yeah,
Evan.
well, absolutely. And touching on IRR, if you can enhance the value of the site enough, you can end up in a position where you can put the capital that you originally put in to buy it, you can take that back out again, and you actually end up with effectively with no cash in there. You've got equity in the deal, but you can take the cash that you've put in out and put that into another deal. So that's something very valuable. I mean, planning is integral to anything that any developer does, but I think I'm going to slightly skip the question and talk about what I think is one of the more interesting planning gain opportunities that we've realised. It's our site that we're currently developing in Gloucester. It has the consent that we've achieved is for 19 units, which is 12 houses and 12 new build houses and 7 flats. When we bought the site, it had an outline consent for 12 units, which was the conversion of a former school building into 2 units plus 10 new build houses. When we bought it, the envisaged gross development value was $3.5 million, and the residual site value, which is what we paid for it, was $725,000. With the enhancements we achieved, we ended up with a residual site value of $1.35 million and a gross development value of about $7 million. So we doubled the value of the end values simply through planning gain, and we almost doubled the value of the site. With the development we're doing in Kennington at the moment, we envisage that we'll be able to more than double the value of that site. We've bought that for $8.7 million. So you can do those numbers for yourself, but that's a lot of money to make from planning gain. Just on PD specifically though, I don't like PD schemes because there's no planning uplift, there we go, I did it, in PD schemes. Because if development is permitted, you're not adding any value because everybody knows that development, okay, you can get a prior approval, but the point of PD is that you don't need a planning consent. All prior approval does is gets the planning authority to confirm that they agree with you that site is subject to PD. So in theory, there shouldn't be any planning uplift from a permitted development. So the point about adding value through planning is there are only really 2 ways to do it. One is by adding more floor space, so additional houses, for example, on a multi-house development, or additional floor space somehow in a city centre site. So that might be, I don't know, compressing floor to ceiling heights to fit another floor in. It could be going down, adding a basement. It could be adding another story, maybe set back from the front elevation so that you get more floor space. But in that floor space, the value of that floor space is determined by the difference between per square foot end values and per square foot build values in that location. And that's how you work out where the greatest potential for planning uplift is. So I think from my perspective, PD is this panel's about planning uplift, planning gain, whatever you want to call it. But from my perspective, PD it presents very little opportunity for increasing the value of sites through planning. And actually, if you do proper planning uplift, then what you're doing is you are creating more space, you're using sites more efficiently, so you're delivering more accommodation, more office space, or more whatever it is through that scheme. The other way that you can achieve an increase in value through planning is through change of use. So you might find that one use is more valuable than another. And it's not always residential that's the highest value use. Often it is, but you might find on a particular site that hotel use is higher value or office use is higher value. And so it's very important to look at what the market is in the area that you're developing, because that will drive value.
Fantastic. And we touched on airspace, which seems to be a fairly hot topic of this year just past. Does anyone want to touch on what it's going, what changes have come in, and how people could utilise this shift in the planning policies?
I want to add to that, actually, because I'm not sure that Office to Resi PD is quite as much of a lucrative opportunity as everybody thought it was. I think there are some very high-profile developers who are involved in it who are no longer around. That might speak to the profitability of those schemes. I think on airspace, I think that I was asked to write an article on or make some comments on this for one of the papers, the Evening Standard, I think. And I think the issue is going to be where somebody's got a house and they've got permission to extend it up by 2 stories. How are the neighbours going to feel about that? There will have to be some controls, or if there aren't, some people are going to get very angry. That is probably the main thing that holds back development, actually, people getting angry about stuff happening around them. That's not going to get any easier. As this island gets denser, we have only got a certain amount of land, there's going to be more and more pressure against development. And so, deregulating by relaxing the planning system is going to make that difficult. The fact is that the planning system is what keeps property values high. If we didn't have any planning constraints, you could build wherever you want, and there would be no value in a planning consent. I think it's difficult to see a situation where planning laws are significantly relaxed. I think the trend is that they will get tighter and tighter, and there's a limited amount that we can do. So I think we just will have to be more innovative and live in smaller spaces and find different ways of doing things, like co-living, for example. Inevitably, I think that's where we have to end up.
I think that's a pretty key point there, that we're talking about like the buzzwords, but I get from that panel the traditional stuff still works. You just got to know where to find it and how to do it. And that was pretty key where Evan said there's a few people that had been doing PD, in realms that people haven't been doing before and are not around any longer. That's because you start running into issues that haven't been there before, such as such high pound per square foot rates because it's the 30 metre square flat and mortgage companies can't fund it on the back end. So it's pretty key. Sometimes don't follow the buzzwords, stick to the basics and get better at it.
I mean, there's a huge resistance by the government and the planning system to town centre development because people want retail. There's this thing called the internet, which is you can't legislate against. The internet has already re-engineered our society and the way that we buy things in a manner that will kill town centres. There are only certain types of activity that are going to persist there, and so when you end up with large empty retail units in town centres, you've got to decide what you're going to do with them. You can't force the planning system to mandate retail units if that's not economically viable anymore, and it isn't already. It's already too late for that. That one has passed. But the planning system is still in that mode. It'll take some time to change, but in that change there is some opportunity, and so I think people can foresee more vibrant town centres, absolutely less parking, autonomous vehicles, spaces which are more flexible in terms of the way that people live. There's a hotel operator that we're working with called Room 2 who have a concept called the Hometel, and the idea behind that is that you can not just stay for 2 days or a week, but you can stay for 3 months or 6 months if you like, and so they'll adjust what it costs. So it's a sort of a cross between hotel and co-living. So it gives people flexibility about the way that they want to live, and you can see us moving towards a world where it's living as a service rather than a situation where necessarily you own your own home.
You talked about going up. What about going down?
I mean, we're going down we're going to dig to China on our Clapham Road scheme. So no, absolutely. I mean, that's actually taking car parking space, which is considered at ground floor. But yeah, you're right. The problem is there are constraints about what you can put in basements. You can't put dwellings in basements. The government won't let you. I'm not saying they should or shouldn't, but that's how it works at the moment. There probably will need to be a bit more flexibility around that, I think.
Ben actually got planning on a basement for EXP. It was a Undercroft car park on a site, and he went and got planning for 2 2-bed flats. So it's gone from pretty much no value, 5 to 10k value on the 6 flats above, to now a planning site with 2 2-bed flats. So I think there's scope there.
Just one thing, with basements, there is an economies of scale thing. So While Paul is right, on a small-scale basement, it might be 250 to 300 pounds a square foot. If you've got a big basement that's maybe 20,000 square feet, you could probably do that for 160 pounds a square foot because of the economics of the thing. So I think it depends what it is, and I mean one of the key points with the development is always understand your costs, and costs that work for one scheme may not work for another.
Virtually every town centre you go to, it's full of charity shops, whatever. You mentioned a few ideas. I'm just interested in more ideas about how you see the reinvigoration of town centres going forward.
Yeah, well, I think we've got to be clear about what's going to happen. Retail in its current form is going to be decimated. I don't mean it's going to disappear altogether. We will still have shops, but the internet is going to be the primary place that we all shop. So of the retail that we currently have, probably only 20% of it will remain. And that will create a huge number of empty buildings. It is only just starting. Look at the number of retail bankruptcies we've had in this country in the last 12 months. I was offered a 200,000 square foot building in a town centre. It's currently tenanted by Debenhams. They're moving out. They're going. It's going to happen all over the country. And so that creates opportunity. And it will create a huge drive for change in the planning system because we're not, it's not going to be popular for us to end up with empty town centres, and that's what will happen if there's this continued insistence on it's happening already, but it's going to get worse. So I think where this is going to end up is we're going to see a few hubs where people go to shops to see stuff. They don't necessarily buy it, like the Apple store or the Microsoft store. You go to those shops, you try the stuff out, but you don't necessarily buy it there. You go home and buy it over the internet. So you're going to have placeholders where people buy stuff. You're going to have maybe retail in airports. But those placeholders are going to be in big hubs like Regent Street or Oxford Street. You might have them in the centre of Birmingham or Manchester. But regional retail, it's going to have to find a different form.
Yeah, I completely agree. One thing I've seen in Reading is the post office has relocated inside WH Smith's. So it's like sharing the space. So similar to co-living, I think there's going to be like cooperative areas where businesses privy together in a complementary sense, so you can buy all of your essentials to post something and then go to the post office.
Edinburgh, what's been happening is that junior planning officers are just becoming post boxes. So that they're, you give them everything they want. They might say, yeah, okay, I'm going to support that. But they go up to their team leader, and the team leader comes up with a whole lot of other criteria. What they have started, and I've never been a fan in the past of it, but they've started a pre-app system whereby 350 quid, maybe another 300 quid if you want a site visit, and they give that to a team leader. And I was just wondering if that's happening anywhere else and whether the panel thinks that might make pre-app better.
I have a great solution to that, which is privatise the planning system. With all seriousness, councils are very bureaucratic organisations, and it's well proven that the private sector is able to run things much more efficiently than government bodies are. It's something that should seriously be considered. I've seen it happen actually in some local planning authorities. But to come into your question about pre-apps, I did some pre-apps earlier on with some planning authorities where they didn't charge for a pre-app. And I've done pre-apps with planning authorities who do, and I can tell you, you very much get what you pay for. In other words, a pre-app you don't pay for is not usually that valuable. If the council is charging for it, it means they can afford to put somebody more senior on it, and you're more likely to get a properly thought through response. And in some situations, pre-apps can be really useful. The one thing that a pre-app will do is to some extent, it will allow you to draw out, if you get a proper response, that is, it'll allow you to draw out the council's policy arguments for whether or not they'll support or more usually decline your application. So in a way, it gives you some ammunition to put your planning application together in a manner so as to defeat those arguments if they're opposing what you're doing. But it also allows you to tune your planning application so as to get around those arguments, and you end up with something that's more likely to be accepted. So when it works really well.